they also finished the year. They won it, so they finished the year with 11 titles in a year as a pair. So Eun has the record for women's singles. Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung Jae now have the record for men's doubles, and Seo Seung Jae also has the personal record for overall titles, because also this year he won the Thai Masters with Jin Yong, so that means that he's ended the year on 12 titles. I don't think any player, I know actually that no other player has ever won that many in a year. Absolutely incredible. And let's not forget, I said Park Ju-bong had said about Eun Seung, but she didn't win the Worlds. Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung Jae, they won all 3 of the major championships this year. They won the All England World Championships and have now won the World Tour Finals. So they matched what the Daddies did in 2019. But the difference between the Daddies and Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung Jae is not only did they finish the year as world number 1, but they've won all those titles. Whereas in 2019, I think the number of finals that the Daddies reached was like 10 or 11. But really, those majors were one of the only ones they won, because they obviously kept playing against the Minions, who were the best pair in the world when it came to the regular tour at that point. Now, Kim Won-ho and Seo Seung Jae weren't perfect in this tournament, although they did win all their matches. But I felt in the group stages they were a little off, especially Kim Won-ho. I know in the final that Steen Pedersen was talking about Kim Won-ho possibly having an injury to his hamstring. I wasn't too aware of that. But I did think that he was a little bit vulnerable in the earlier matches. But they showed a champion's mentality by still finding ways to win and coming through top. And then in the knockout stages, I felt they just got better and better. In the semi-finals against Gautam and Isfahani, repeated the groups. They were helped by Isfahani's injury. You tell his left knee was heavily taped, even from the start, every time, because if it's his left knee and a right-hander, that's the leg he lands on every time he jumps around the head. And every time he did, he was almost falling out the court. And that match was pretty one-sided, so it's a real shame. I hope that isn't too serious on Isfahani's behalf. And then in the final, they were almost perfect, as they were up against the Olympic silver medalists, and a pair that I felt had one of their best tournaments of the year, their best performances, and that's Wang Chang and Liang Weikang. I said that I do believe that Wang Chang and Liang Weikang, this is their best performance, although they did win the Hong Kong Open earlier this year. And I made this note, and I'm not saying this because I know that Steen Pedersen mentioned this. I actually wrote this down before that, before even the final begun, that I felt that they were having their best performance. And Steen said, even because Jill obviously said, well, what about the Hong Kong Open? They won that. And he said, well, the competition here is much fiercer. And also just the way they played. Definitely the best performance. The final did have great potential. It didn't quite live up to it. It was still really good. It was still entertaining. We got the Korean defense and the counter-attack versus the Chinese speed and all-out attack, which has been getting better and better as the tournament got on. And I was also a bit curious as to how the Koreans might be able to win their points. They are very good at linking up. They're both very good at coming forward to the front court. And actually, that for me was one of the differences. Wang Chan, when it comes to the Chinese pair, Wang Chan is the front player, Liang Weikang is the rear player. They've got that kind of classic, each player has got their kind of roles. When it comes to the Koreans, they're like a chameleon pair. I do believe, I did say this earlier in the year, that that's something that I think is where doubles, especially men's doubles, is going. You can't have an out-and-out rear and front player. The rear player needs to be able to play the front and vice versa. And I think maybe that's something that the Chinese, more so Liang Weikang, needs to develop a little bit of his front court to kind of help out Wang Chan a little bit. Because in this match at the start, one thing that I felt was noticeable in the earlier rounds for the Chinese was how good Wang Chan was at getting himself involved, whether it was driving the defense or playing into a gap and then rushing forward. And, he's like a magician. He is a little bit like the Chinese Kevin Sanjaya Sukamoyo in a way. He's very flamboyant, really good at intercepting shots around there. But against the Koreans, at the start of the game, the Chinese Wang Chan was able to get himself involved, but as the match got on and on and on, he started to become more and more invisible on the court. He wasn't able to make as much of an impact, and I think that's down to the Koreans are very solid in defense. They're very good at their patient play. If they're in a slightly bad position, they always play with good quality, still maintaining pressure and building the rally, but not giving much for the Chinese or whoever they play to feed off. And the other thing, and it leads back to what I said about you need the difference between the Koreans and the Chinese is they can both be good front court players. The Koreans were so good at linking together, but finding a position where both of them are at the net. It does help the fact they're right and left-handed, so if Seo Seung Jae's on the left side and Kim Won-ho on the right, and it's both their forehands. It's almost impossible to get it away from them. But they're so good at finding, getting themselves into those positions, and they did it again perfectly in the final. I think they have, obviously had a brilliant year, but this is their first year as a partnership. And I think one thing that over this year, as I've watched them, that's got better is how well they are linking up their rotational play, their ability to kind of they basically getting to know each other even better. So I noticed that, say, at the start of the year, they could still link up well because Koreans are pretty good at kind of being able to kind of form any partnership and make it work. Last year, we were all talking about all these different Korean partnerships that are going on, and they kept winning. But as this year's got on, they've kind of like got a better sense of knowing what shots their partner's going to do. So Seo Seung Jae almost knows before Kim Won-ho hits it, he's probably going to do this, so then he's ready for this, and vice versa. That's something that I felt has got far more organised, far more efficient, and it's what's made them really good. And actually, I think in some matches where they haven't been as strong later in this year, they've still been able to come through. Like I said, in the group stages, they weren't perfect. They almost lost to Man and T of Malaysia in the groups. They had two tight games against Gutama and Isfahani, and I think even in their opening game against the Chinese Taipei pair, they had close game there, but they're still able to find ways because I think their communication is basically, it's also making them much harder to defeat them. So yeah, in this final, they were able to kind of neutralize Wang Chang's effect. At the end of the second, though, when the Koreans looked like they were miles up, the Chinese had a little flourish. I think they kind of just went, fuck it, and they just came forward regardless of what was happening, and it kind of worked. It threw a little bit of a spanner in the works, but that leads to one last thing for me about the Koreans. They kind of went, the Chinese won 7 straight points and got it back to 17-14, and then the Koreans just went, right, okay, and were super solid, changed up their top tactics. They did a couple of lifts over the top because the Chinese kept rushing. Even when they were like holding them, they'd suddenly go over the top and change tactics and won 4 straight points to win it 21-14. It was sensing. The crowd were really getting into it. They could feel it. The commentators, I could feel it. The Chinese, they'd won 1 more point, 2 more points, maybe a different complexion on the match. But the Koreans, they did let them back in. Yes, that's true. But they then went, right, it's almost like they just went, boom, and they just were so calm. And they just slightly changed what they did. And that's one thing, they're also so good that they can just be so adaptable on the fly. And I think that's made it a little easier, like I said, their rotational play, both in attack and defense, and just in general, and just their know-how of each other has just got so much better. And moving into 2026, I think someone's asked this, so I might wait for them, but they're going to be very difficult to topple off the top. So moving on, I want to stick with Korea, actually.